Have you ever wondered why there is a priority lane for fast food restaurants? Or why you have to wait in the line in the first place? Have you ever wondered why people spend so much money for the newer versions of processors that manufacturers release? It's like, I could buy a new high-end phone with that, right? Well, that's like what we're gonna talk about today, but not exactly about fast food lanes. Well, you'll get the point. We'll talk about the computer processor and how it schedules the processes that our system and program makes. Let's picture it the way that the computer processors work. Think of yourself as a processor, and I am a software. I will make a request saying, what's the product of 365 and 3? Come on, you can do it. Anyone? Okay. Well, after some time, you will come to the conclusion that the product is 1095. Let's try and look at it at the perspective of single processors. Processors can only process one thing at a time. What the processor actually does is switching processes so fast that it looks like it's doing plenty of stuff at a time. Process scheduling algorithms. Sounds dangerous, right? But I'll shed some light to ask why you have to wait in that gruesome line for your favorite kiddie meal, or as why weren't your splinters that you got from building your new computer treated later than the guy who accidentally stabbed himself in the knee with an arrow, even though you were in the hospital first. Let's go back to that waiting in line for your kiddie meal example. Think of the restaurant as a processor, and you, the customer waiting in line, as the process. There are two types of processes, I/O-bound processes and CPU-bound processes. Now, you, as the customer, are an I/O-bound process. I/O stands for input and output. You will need a bit of the cashier's computation power, such as adding your cost, but for the most part, you will be talking with the cashier. Okay, now you've ordered your favorite kiddie meal. What's next? The restaurant will now begin preparing what you've ordered. That's a new process, a CPU-bound process to be exact, because there won't be a lot of talking there, but a lot of doing. Which piece goes first, the bread or the ketchup? Okay, now we know the differences between I/O-bound and CPU-bound processes, but we still don't know why you have to wait in line, say, for those crispy, juicy chicken nuggets that you've planned your entire afternoon to eat. This is where process scheduling comes in. Process scheduling is basically the allocating of resources to a process, be it time or memory cache. In this case, it's the attention of the cashier. A general rule in process scheduling is that, ideally, the processor will be in use all the time to maximize efficiency. Now, there are two types of process scheduling, preemptive and non-preemptive. Preemptive is when you can interrupt the current process by pushing the cashier's current customer aside and ordering before the guy was done. Don't do that, by the way. That's rude. Non-preemptive is when you have to wait for the guy to finish ordering before you can cut in line in front of everyone else. Again, don't do that. That's rude. Just wait for your turn. Now, let's dig a little deeper and start with a non-preemptive process scheduling. First come, first serve, or FCFS, also known as first in, first out, or FIFO. This is the simplest schedule that can be implemented. This is pretty much just waiting in line. The processor has to finish its current process before it can switch to another. While this is the easiest to implement, but not the most optimized. Let's say that guy in front of you takes so long to order his meal that it will make the average wait time of the processes, the customers, longer, because everyone behind him will have to wait for him to finish before the cashier will accept another customer. Now, think of this. What if the line is arranged by the amount of time that the customer takes in ordering, going from quickest to slowest? Well, that's called shortest job first, or SJF. It's also known as shortest process first, or SPF. SPF scheduling is pretty much as the name implies it to be. There's another version of SPF scheduling, preemptive SPF. In preemptive SPF, the processor will stop doing its current process if there is another process that requires less time to do. Let's say that guy in front of you that's taking a long time to order and you can order it quickly. If preemptive SPF was implemented in the restaurant, then the cashier will turn his attention to you and pretty much interrupt the guy that was ordering. But what if it's lunchtime and everyone has to order fast because they have work to do, right? Then the guy who takes longer to order will starve. Now, really, that's the term for it. The process will starve and may never finish at all. Now, in the real world, both preemptive and non-preemptive SPF are next to impossible to implement. The cashier will have to know who can order the quickest before, and that could take a while since they'll have to personally befriend each customer beforehand. Now, let's drift away from our waiting in line example. Let's say you're in a hospital's waiting room because you accidentally burned yourself from doing that burning hand trick. So you get a queue number and sat down, but then suddenly a guy was brought in via stretcher. He was in a car accident. He's in critical condition and was promptly taken to the emergency room. The guy has a higher priority than you. That's priority scheduling. Each process has a priority number, and the processor will process the process with the highest priority number. But if two processes both have FCFS, or first come first serve, or round robin as a tiebreaker, and because you and everyone else in the waiting room are in a queue, have the same priority, you'll have to wait your turn. Amazon Prime is another good example of priority scheduling, and the tiebreaker used in it is FCFS, first come first serve. The downside of priority scheduling is the same as FCFS. What if there's a constant stream of high priority processes? Then the processes with lower priorities will never get to execute. Well, it's also known as starving. But there's a solution. As time progresses, just increase the priority of each process. That way, every process will eventually be processed unless there's always a very high priority process being processed at the time. Okay, I mentioned another process schedule earlier, the round robin scheduling. Now, it's a bit tricky, but think of a metaphor for this. But here's one. Think of the Spartans. Each individual Spartan can do one thing at a time, attack or defend, just like the processor. The Spartans have to attack and defend, but they can't do both at the same time. So what do? They alternate between attacking and defending. Each process gets a small unit of processing time called a time quantum. Sounds scary. And it is usually 10 to 100 milliseconds. If the quantum is too large, then it'll be the same as FCFS. But if it's too small, then there'll be too much overhead due to context switching. Context switching is the storing of the process's progress and loading another. This may be a very complex topic for some, but we hope that we could shed some light into why people spend a lot of money for the beefiest processors and why servers require more physical cores than the average user. Having a multi-core or hyper-threaded processor will multiply the power of your processor, especially in multitasking or multi-threaded processes. Likewise, the most efficient process scheduling is what the operating systems are striving to achieve. So, whether you use a very high-end processor and a good operating system, or a good processor and a very efficient operating system, well, it depends on you. I hope we enlightened you on how your computer works and how the process scheduling works and how it benefits you and your processors.